Dear colleagues and participants, welcome to the expert discussion on progress of SDG7 for affordable and clean energy. My name is Cholpan Orzabekova, Director of the Bulan Institute for Peace Innovations, and I'm honored to moderate this event. SDG7 represents a pivotal global initiative focusing on achieving universal access to affordable, sustainable, and clean energy by 2030. As we all know, energy is at the heart of many critical areas, including poverty eradication, health, education, economic growth, and also climate change mitigation. However, the latest data and analysis indicate that many countries are not on track to achieve many of the targets. Today, we want to discuss and delve into the progress made towards SDG7, looking at the challenges that countries face and exploring ways to accelerate efforts in closing existing gaps. This event is organized by the Bulan Institute in close collaboration with the Sustainable Energy Division of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. On behalf of the Bulan Institute, I thank Mr. Dario Leguti and Mr. Gianluca Sambuccini and other amazing team members of the UNICEF's Sustainable Energy Division. To all participants, please keep your microphone and cameras off for the entirety of the discussion. And also please click on the interpretation button and choose your language, English or Russian. And we will have a Q&A session where you can ask a question or make a comment later. So today we have a distinguished panel of experts from IRENA, OSCE, and Harvard University who will share their insights and experiences with us. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Dario Leguti, Director of Sustainable Energy at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Mr. Dario Leguti is a Director of the division at the UNICEF, Sustainable Energy Division, and UNICEF includes 56 member states in North America, Europe, and Asia. In this capacity, he provides analysis, policy advice, and assistance to the governments for the implementation of the important aspects of the Agenda for Sustainable Development and also Paris agreements. And UNICEF facilitates, in general, international cooperation in energy within and outside this region. His professional experience in the energy space spans almost 30 years. Prior to joining UNICEF, Mr. Leguti was the Chief Underwriting Officer at the Italian State Guarantee Agency. Mr. Dario Leguti, thank you for joining us, and it's a really great honor for us to have you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having invited me to open this very important discussion around SDG7. What I would like to give as opening remarks and to give to set the scene for the next speakers from the panel to discuss about the challenges, I would like to give you a little bit of where we are in the achievement of the SDG7 objectives under the Paris Agreement. So we all agree that the world is not on track to achieve any of the SDG7 targets. And there's only 6 years left to achieve this and other sustainable development goals. And so the promise of achieving SDG7, which is an important goal because it's linked to many of the other 17 SDGs, is in peril. All actors need to act now. And the United Nations, including ourselves at UNEC, are on the front line to make sure that all possible efforts are done to achieve the SDG7. So, but before we get into what's needed, we need to understand where we are in this process. So, according to the UN Secretary General report in 2023 on ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all, we can better understand where we are, what are the key bottlenecks, and what is needed to move towards the achievement of this goal. Since the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development has been launched, the climate crisis is worsening as greenhouse gas emissions continues to rise. Global temperatures have been crossing the 1.5 degrees tipping point for many months now. In fact, there is a debate whether we are actually over that on a structural basis, or is this linked as well to temporal situations like El Nino. But certainly the average temperature has been increasing and is continuing increasing. catastrophic and intensifying heat waves, droughts, flooding, and wildfires have become far too frequent. Energy is an essential ingredient for getting the world back on track towards meeting the goals and the objectives of the Paris Agreement on climate change. 60% of the emissions in the world come from the energy sector. The review of Goal 7 at the 2023 high-level political forum last year on sustainable development in New York has underscored that although it is currently off track, it is still possible to achieve Goal 7 by 2030 through rapid acceleration of global efforts in the coming few years. And my colleagues, I'm sure they will be talking about what is needed to get there by 2030. Let me give you some figures at global level, and then a bit more of a focus on the UNECE region, which is more important and closer to our discussions. So we are off track in ensuring universal access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy. Notwithstanding the fact that access to electricity globally has increased from 84% in 2010 to 91% in 2021, 675 million people are still without access to electricity. To close the electricity access gap, we need to raise the level of growth from 0.6 percentage points, which was the average between 2019 and 21, to 1%. So almost double what we have been achieving over the last few years. In 2021, 71% only of the global population had access to clean cooking fuels and technologies, an increase of 14% since 2010, but still 2.3 billion people are still using polluting fuels and technologies for most of their cooking. The share of renewable energy in total final energy reached 19.1% in 2020, thanks to an overall reduced energy consumption during the COVID-19 pandemic, but this is far too low. It's only 19%. Target 7.3, which concerns energy efficiency, calls for the doubling of the global rate of improvement over the average between 1990 and 2010. Which means improving energy intensity by 2.6% per year, every year, between 2010 and 2030. Between 2010 and 2020, we only achieved 1.8. So we're short of that 2.6% needed for energy efficiency. So as you can see, whether it's on access to electricity, access to clean cooking fuels, and the level of energy intensity of our systems, we're still behind where we should be. And in order to achieve the SDG7 goals, we need to double on average or triple on average some of the growth rates in these metrics between now and 2030. I'm more focused now, look at UNECE region, which is what is interest to us, looking at both the Secretary General report and a report that we did with REN 21 in 2022. So, we're talking about our region, in particular within our region, about what we call the program countries, which is Central Asia, the Caucasus, and the Western Balkans in particular. So there has been improvement in the region, but the pace of that improvement, it's too slow for guaranteeing the achievement of the objectives of the 2030. So positive, but still not enough. Access to electricity and the use of clean fuels for cooking, heating, and lighting in our region is widespread. So it's not the real issue here when we look, as opposed to other regions around the world. The use of renewable energy has been growing in 3/4 of our member states. Remember, 56 member states, in more than 3/4, and energy efficiency has as well been improving in nearly all members. But again, that pace is not where it should be. In fact, there are particular challenges in our region. Example, affordability of clean fuels and technologies, particularly, and this is not even taking into account the impact of the recent war and the polycrisis that have been going throughout our region in 2022-2023, which has actually worsened that situation versus the data that I'm using at. This situation is particularly acute for low-income households, and energy poverty has become more widespread than what it used to be in our region. A shortage of skills and qualifications, for example, for the deployment of renewable energy or digital skills or digital technologies as well when it comes to energy efficiency, is another issue that has been particularly strong in our region. And persistent behavioral barriers, as you know, changing. We have seen recently as well the backlash in many countries across our region towards the green transition. We saw the recent European Parliament elections. We saw what happened in the UK and in a number of other countries. These issues are serious and are very important and are hampering the energy transition. The ECE region accounts for almost half of the close to 2,000 gigawatt renewable installed worldwide. In 2020, 30 member states of our region had a share of renewable energy in the energy mix above the global average that I mentioned before, the 19%. Well, 12%, in 12 member states, that percentage is more than double the global average. But that means that the other countries, that average is very, very slow, very, very low, particularly in places like Central Asia, where there's a lot of potential for growth for renewable energy. In terms of energy efficiency, there has been some progress, but much more remains to be done. In 2020, the energy intensities that we had across our region has improved towards 3.51 megajoule per dollar, below the 4.09 megajoule per dollar, that's the world average, and below the median that we had 20 years before, which was 5.54. Energy intensity is the amount of energy that we use to produce 1 unit of GDP. But within the region, we have a very widespread range. It grows from 1.22 to almost 13 megajoule per dollar. And that speaks about the need for much further improvement, particularly in countries like Central Asia, where energy efficiency is still too low for achieving the objectives of the 2030 Paris Agreement. Public and private investment, this comes as well. We identify some of the challenges. Another one I'm sure will come out is the availability of finance to support, particularly again in Central Asia, the Caucasus, and to a certain extent the Western Balkans as well, the investment in renewable energy, in energy efficiency projects, which need to happen. In particular, the capital flow towards Central Asia and the Caucasus is way too modest. It's way too small. It only represents 14% of the world's total. That's what's way too low. So we know where we are. I gave a lot of data points. I'm sure my colleagues will elaborate on that, will take more on those on board. And it's therefore up to each of all of us to contribute to close that gap, to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Bearing in mind this direction, I wish all a fruitful discussion today and concrete actions in the days to come. And thank you for giving me the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leguiti, for your insightful address. Indeed, there is an urgent need for rapid acceleration of orchestrated efforts, I think. And thank you very much for your remarks. In the latest report on tracking SDG7, the International Renewable Energy Agency highlighted that developing and least developed countries are significantly behind in meeting the targets. And as of 2021, 675 million people worldwide still lacked access to electricity, but by 2030, this number will be decreased only to 660 million people. This lack of access is particularly severe in sub-Saharan Africa, parts of Asia. So now I introduce you Ms. Nsebo Sefalania, Associate Professional in Energy Access and Renewable Energy Policy at IRENA, International Renewable Energy Agency. She will provide an overview of the progress of SDG7 in developing and least developed countries. Ms. Nsebo Sefalania holds a Master of Science degree in Sustainable Energy. Before IRENA, she worked in project development, where she managed the installation of several off-grid mini-grid, and utility-scale projects for businesses, schools, clinics, and communities. She also worked in projects owned by World Bank, UNDP, JET Invest, and European Commission. Ms. Sefalane, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
I will proceed. So as I was saying, I think it's important to also highlight the fact that energy is just but an input, and what we are really going for is socio-economic development. And in order for us to have that socio-economic impact, we need to have installations on the ground. We need to have energy on the ground. I really like this session because it came at a very timely moment when we just published this year's tracking energy SDG7 just yesterday. So it's pretty coincidental that in line with our publication, these sessions were held. I'm going to begin the presentation by giving a brief overview of the tracking SDG7 report, what kind of indicators it highlights, as well as zooming in focus particularly on the two main indicators, which is access to electricity and access to clean fuels and technologies for clean cooking. And I'll also touch on finance as a major enabler for energy access as a whole. So the tracking SDG7 report is an annual report that tracks basically global progress towards the UNDP Sustainable Development Goal number 7. And it basically serves as a guideline for policymakers and the international community in advancing energy access, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and overall international collaboration. So IRENA is one of the custodian agencies of this publication, along with the World Bank, the World Health Organization, the IEA, and the UN Statistics Division. So under SDG7, there are 6 major targets that we capture and measure progress on. And this includes the proportion of population with access to electricity, the proportion of population that have access to clean cooking, renewable energy share as a total of final energy consumption, energy intensity as also highlighted by the keynote speaker, international public finance flows towards developing countries, as well as installed energy capacity in developing and developed countries. So what we saw, the picture that we saw this year is especially interesting when we look at electricity access. For the first time, we have seen an increase in the gap in electricity access, which then further means that we are not on track at all towards achieving our goals. For the first time since the tracking endeavor has been undertaken, the gap in electricity access increased by 10 million because of the fact that population growth outpaced the rate of electrification. When it comes to the reasons why this is, there are several reasons which we will discuss later in this presentation. So when we look at and zooming in on focus on access to electricity as well as access to clean cooking, this is the overview of the picture that we see. We see a lot of geographic disparities when it comes to electricity access. As you can see, a lot more on Central Asia or Southeast Asia, as well as Africa, are the ones that are facing this burden the most. So of the 685 million people that are estimated to lack access, 570 million of them are based in Africa, and almost 1 billion of them, when it comes to clean cooking, are situated in Africa as well. So some of the challenges that have led to this kind of situation, this kind of picture, relate to finance, which is another indicator that we track. What we see from a global perspective or from an international perspective is that advanced economies are the ones that bear benefit to a lot of finance that is dedicated towards progressing energy access. So advanced economies, which comprise of only 13% of the population, attract 5 times more investment per capita when compared to emerging and developing economies. And this number becomes even worse when you remove China from that number, and it becomes even further removed when you exclude countries like Brazil and countries like India. we get to find that emerging and developing economies only account for only 10% of the global investments in renewable energy, which means that in the magnitude of how much finance is being allocated towards renewable energy, only a fraction goes towards developing countries, and that then substantiates the lack of access that we see. So when it comes to some localized challenges that some developers, energy service providers, end users, and the overall enabling environment experience when it comes to them trying to push the needle towards electrification and as well as progress in clean cooking, you find that they are confronted with a lot of challenges that pertain to them developing a project, how they grow their enterprises, and the kind of support that they're offered when they are operating and operating projects within these contexts. Is a rather challenging context. Even from a demand side perspective, you find that issues like end user affordability are very prevalent. Demand stimulation issues rise, and the need to raise more awareness towards the recipients of these renewable energy services is still a challenge. So when it comes to the enabling environment, which is the ecosystem that all these projects exist under, you find that there's a lack of policy and planning and regulation. There's a lack of capacity building at an institutional level. There's also a lack of institutional awareness, and there's no data to substantiate some of the things that we want to do or to help plan certain projects better. So I'd like to move over to the role that off-grid renewables particularly have played towards pushing the needle towards universal energy access. So as of 2022, our stats division found that almost 300 million people had gained access through off-grid means. Off-grid technologies relate to things like solar lights, mini-grids, solar home systems, and any kind of off-grid or distributed renewable energy technology that serves these unserved areas. So if you look at the modeling that is also done by the World Bank, they projected that a significant chunk of the people that we see without access will possibly be electrified using off-grid renewables under their least cost electrification model. So when we also look at when we go back to the investment picture as well, we realize the role that off-grid renewables investments have played towards pushing that needle towards energy access. Although they only receive a small chunk of investments, they've received only 4 billion in the last 10 years, but that 4 billion has been able to electrify 200 million people. So decentralized renewable energy, in our view, has quite a high impact return or a high impact return in investment, because a small quantum has really gone a long way towards pushing that needle towards electrification as well as clean cooking access. So what we like to focus on as IRENA is sort of like reshaping this global picture of finance flows, how finances are used towards electrification and universal energy access. So we've developed a framework that outlines public funding flows, or rather public and private funding flows towards electrification, so that we can formulate a framework or model that at least at a high level frames this movement of flows towards solutions that actually bring energy access that we speak about. So at the start, we spoke about international financing flows. We definitely need to ramp up that in order to achieve access, especially in regions that don't have access at all. We need to be targeted to the solutions that we are trying to provide. And we need to also target the specific users of that finance. And the way that we disperse them will then result in the benefits to the end users, which is our end goal, towards the socio-economic development that we're trying to get to. This is the end of the presentation. And yeah, I will hand over to you, Ms. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Ms. Netsova Severania, for your important remarks. Indeed, I think thank you for highlighting really important challenges, obstacles, like for example, lack of financial resources, lack of investment, and institutional weaknesses also. And next, we'll hear from Ms. Giulia Manconi, Senior Energy Security Advisor at the OCCS Secretariat, who will talk about promoting just, inclusive, and resilient energy transitions in Central Asia. Ms. Giulia Manconi leads the work of the OCC in the field of energy security, sustainability. In her role, she manages a diverse portfolio of projects aimed at protecting critical energy infrastructure from human-made and natural disasters, building climate resilience in the energy sector, advancing the transition to cleaner energy, and promoting women's empowerment in the field. Prior to joining the OCC, Giulia worked for the Italian OCC chairpersonship, the EU delegation to the OCC, and also the Italian embassy to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Ms. Giulia Manconi, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Cholpon, and good afternoon or good evening or morning, everyone, depending on where you are. It's a pleasure being here. So thank you very much for the invitation. As you mentioned, my name is Giulia Manconi. I'm a Senior Energy Security Advisor within the Office of the Coordinator of OSCE Economic and Environmental Activities. And today I have the pleasure of talking to you about our work on advancing just, inclusive, and resilient energy transitions. I will focus on the case of Central Asia and bring the perspective of the OSCE when it comes to SDG 7. And I would like to start by focusing on the mandate of the OSCE in this field, in the field of sustainable energy, energy security, and also just transitions, which is based on several Ministerial Council decisions, which are approved and have been approved by the participating states on consensus. And through these Ministerial Council decisions, the 57 participating states of the OSCE recognized the urgent need to, first of all, reduce the environmental impact of the energy sector through promote renewable energy integration and deployment and efficiency measures, to integrate gender perspectives also when looking at the development and the implementations of clean energy and energy security and energy access policies, and also to address the security implications of climate change, including through clean energy. And it's based on these Ministerial Council decisions and also responding to the rising needs and requests of the participating states, and particularly Central Asia, that the office where I work, the Office of the Coordinator of OSCE Economic and Environmental Activities, has significantly expanded over the last years supports in the specific area of clean energy and sustainable energy transition. And the way we have expanded and provided support has been through several tailored analyses and also concrete support projects in Central Asia and other countries. These include, for example, our study on advancing energy security in Central Asia, which I invite you all to take a look at. It's free to download from our website. And in this study, we're looking at long-standing but also emerging energy security challenges in Central Asia. And we're also looking at how Central Asian countries could actually harness their renewable energy potential to address energy insecurity. Second, there is also a recent study that we published this year on advancing just energy transition in Central Asia that really looks at the role also of women in the region to advance energy access and clean energy access in particular. But besides analysis, we're also implementing concrete support projects. For example, our project on promoting women's empowerment in the energy sector as a catalyst for energy security and sustainability in Central Asia. And also our recent project on mitigating climate change threats to the energy sector and also to the energy transition. And I will talk about this project later on in the presentation. Before I talk about them, I think some of you might be wondering why a security organization like the OSCE is actually working on clean energy and expanding clean energy access and the energy transition, and why also Central Asian countries are looking into this. And I think one of the first response for us is really energy security, because we all have seen, and I think we have a lot of participants here today, actually from Central Asia, that the energy sector in Central Asia has been increasingly affected by extreme weather events, by rising temperatures, but also by a growing energy demand in the region. We also know that all 5 Central Asian countries actually possess very high potential for renewable energy. And these potential could be really used and harnessed to address energy insecurity on the one hand, also help address the climate crisis. And these points have all been recognized by the Central Asian countries, which are indeed committed and have started to prioritize actually the energy transition and clean energy access, and they have included specific renewable energy targets in their national determined contribution. We have several targets. You can see them in the slides. I will just mention a few. For example, Kazakhstan, that is aiming to achieve 50% of the electricity generation coming from renewable energy sources by 2050. Uzbekistan, 40% of renewable energy in the energy mix by 2030, but also Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan that have included concrete figures in this area in their NDC. Now, besides utilizing clean energy to address energy insecurity and climate change, we also know that the transition to renewable energy in the region is also actually set to become a key motor for job creation, economic development, and well-being. Previous speakers have mentioned that indeed the energy sector is the backbone of our society, and that we looked at improving energy access and clean energy access in particular, especially in light of improving the well-being and socioeconomic conditions of our society. And according to our most recent calculations, which you can find in our study on just energy transition in Central Asia, we found out that the transition to energy, to renewable energy in Central Asia can actually generate up to 100,000 new high-quality jobs for the regions. However, we also know, and this was already mentioned by some speakers, and it's also true for Central Asia, there are still many challenges and gaps that Central Asian countries and many other countries around the world still need actually to address in order to tap into their renewable energy potential. I will mention just a few of these challenges and then tell you what is the OSCE doing to support countries address them. So I'd like to start with the fact that still also in Central Asia, investment policies and regulatory frameworks still need to be, they started to adopt them and they should further adopt them in order to support the prompt deployment of clean energy. Another problem in the region is the fact that actually most energy systems are aging and they often face the problem of not being capable to withstand, for example, high peaks in energy demands that we are seeing more and more due to high temperature or too low temperature, for example. Then, of course, these systems are also not ideally created for renewable energy integrations. And this requires, of course, further investments in the creation of new systems and also to retrofit existing ones. Dario also mentioned this. There is also need to create the specialized workforce that is needed for the energy transition to succeed. And this is also the case in Central Asia, where still there is a lack of specialized or extremely specialized workforce. And for this, we are also working and suggesting Central Asian countries to invest further in women's and youth educations and to update university programs in order to help meet their government targets when it comes to clean energy and renewable energy, and also to support private sector meet the workforce demands. What is more, we also believe that the success of the energy transition actually hinges on countries' capacity to make it just and inclusive, meaning supporting countries and making sure that their new energy systems that are going to be created through the transition actually takes into account the needs of the entirety of the population, especially of those sectors of the population that have been historically underserved. For example, women, youth, but also vulnerable communities. And our work at the OSCE has been focusing over the last year in really helping Central Asian countries advance the energy transition in a way that is sustainable, just, and also climate resilient. There are three main areas of focus for us in this field. The first one is women and youth empowerment in the clean energy sector. The second is fostering energy access in rural areas, and then build also the resilience of energy systems to climate change. And I will just quickly go through some of the concrete work that we're doing in these areas, starting with our project on empowering women in the energy sector as catalysts for energy security and sustainability. This is a project that we launched 2 years ago, really based on the recognition that without empowering women in the energy transitions, then it will be very difficult for countries to actually meet their both their climate and energy goals. And through this project, over the last 2 years, we have been able to empower over 400 women already working in the energy sector to advance in their career and become leaders in the sector. And we did this through mentoring and training, but we're also working to prepare the next generation of female leaders in the energy sector. And we're doing this, for example, through training, but also through the OSCE scholarship program that is supporting women from Central Asia, Afghanistan, and Mongolia to pursue master degrees program in renewable energy. And currently, we're actually selecting for the next. We recently launched the call for applications for the next batch of students. So if you know anybody who would be interested in studying renewable energy, please inform them of this opportunity. And besides working directly with women in the region, we are actually also supporting governments, private sector, universities, and also civil society with providing them with concrete guidance and data and recommendations on how to attract more women in the energy sector and how to make energy policies more inclusive and taking into account also the needs of women. Another important area of work of the OSCE in Central Asia when it comes to clean energy has been our work on advancing clean energy access in the region. In fact, some of you might know that over 50% of the population in Central Asia actually lives in rural areas. And in these areas, still energy access challenges persist. And they, of course, impact the way that rural communities live. We also know that renewable energy and off-grid technologies actually have great potential to address energy poverty in areas where it's very difficult to connect to the grid. And they don't only have the capacity and the potential to improve energy access, but they can also help countries meet their climate goals. And in this regard, last year, the OSCE and my office in particular launched a pilot initiative in Tajikistan in the mountainous areas of the Yagnov Valley, where we provided rural women from 3 villages that are located at nearly 3,000 meters altitude with solar cookers and also mini solar power stations. And we also trained them on how to make the best and efficient use of these devices. And this project in particular has had incredible impact on the lives of these women that have been the direct beneficiary of this, but also of communities and the families of these women, really showing that when women are empowered and when they're given actually access to clean energy technologies, and also when their capacity is built, then the whole of the community actually benefits. And building on the success of this initiative, we're actually now working on other energy access initiatives in the area. We have an energy access initiative coming up soon, through which we'll be able to provide clean energy access to over 1,000 people on the border between Afghanistan and Tajikistan. And we're also working on expanding this to other Central Asian countries in need, including Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. Last but not least, of course, it's very important to help countries advance in their energy transitions and improve energy access. But it's also very important to make sure that clean energy plans and energy transition investments are actually resilient to climate change. And so we are also working to make sure that countries, including Central Asian ones, are able and have the capacity to understand how climate change and climate variations will actually impact the availability of natural resources they will be needing more and more to produce clean energy in the coming years. We see two main challenges for Central Asia. The first one is limited risk awareness on how climate change will impact their energy systems and their generation capacity. And we also see limited access to downscale climate datasets that are needed for them to make informed decisions when it comes to energy security and also energy transition policies. So we recently launched a new project that is exactly addressing these issues through several activities, including a recent assessment that we did that mapped the scope of risk that is posed by climate change to energy sector across the region. Then we're also supporting the development of the first downscale climate model for Central Asian energy sector. But besides providing the data, because the data are only useful when you really know how to make good use of them, we're also training Central Asian decision makers and experts on how to read this data and how to apply the data in a way that they can use it to inform energy security and transition plan. And we're also providing access to Central Asian experts and many others, because this program is actually implemented throughout the whole OSCE region. We have 4 sub-regions included here. So we created an OSCE community of climate and energy sector experts that can be utilized as a platform for exchanging know-how, technology, and experience among these regions. So this way, we are not just providing data and supporting countries to actually advance the transition, but we're also helping them to build the capacity and exchange experiences between them. And with this, I will stop here and I stand ready to respond to any questions you might have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Giulia Manconi, for your comprehensive presentation. Indeed, in the region, in rural areas, there are many gaps, and some villages, they have a serious problem with access. So your work is very important. As you said, there is a gap also in awareness, and we need to raise awareness among specialists and also population. And also, I really like your work, how you empower women in the energy sector. Thank you for this amazing work. And now we will continue to look closer at Central Asian countries. They have started feeling real impact of climate change, and now water scarcity and energy crisis is remarkable than ever. I would like to introduce you our next speaker, Dr. Rahat Sabrbekov. Dr. Rahat Sabrbekov is an environmental economist who specializes in decarbonization, climate change, and energy transition. He's a postdoctoral fellow at the OCC Academy in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, and a visiting scholar at Harvard Davis Center. He obtained his PhD from the School of Economics and Business at Norwegian University of Life Sciences. He published a book, Climate Change in Central Asia, Decarbonization, Energy Transition, and Climate Policy in 2023. And also he co-authored very important research papers on energy transition in Central Asia. For example, on about which countries might fight the European Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, and also fossil fuels in Central Asia, trends and energy transition risks, which was published in 2022. Dr. Rahat Sabrbekov, thank you for joining, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Chalpon. Thank you for invitation. And I'm very glad to be here. And thanks for very insightful presentations, which help kind of set a global context, regional context for my presentation, which probably will go more in details and closer to the actual countries itself. So in this 12 minutes, I'll try to kind of, with a broader, give a broader picture at the same time, just underline the major trends. So very briefly, I'll outline the current energy use situation, how the energy mix, current energy mix in Central Asia looks like, And then I'll talk about the challenges, and then hopefully we'll have opportunity kind of to peek into the future, how the future will look like, and what are the actual aims of the governments, and how realistic these goals are within the national energy programs and also under the Paris Agreement. So this is total energy supply by source. So this is a graph which I think Central Asian governments do not like to see. For example, what you see here, first of all, I think I should tell. So the blue one is a coal, and then the green one is oil, and yellow is natural gas, and hydro is in kind of pinkish red. And there is a renewable solar power as well, but it's too small, so you cannot see, and it's only you can see it's basically in the case of Kazakhstan, which is in recent years remarkable achievement for the oil-based economy, which has now around 3% in the total energy supply. So what we see here on this picture that despite, for example, all the renewable energy potential, the countries are heavily reliant on the fossil fuels. Not only that, so-called water towers of the region, hydropowers of the region, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, are also heavily reliant on oil and gas. So you will see that for the last 30 years, in fact, the share of the hydro energy in the total energy supply actually has been decreasing, while the role of coal, natural gas, and oil has been steadily increasing. As for the fossil fuel rich countries of the region, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, the picture didn't change much for the last 30 years. Kazakhstan is heavily reliant on coal and oil and gas, which is not a surprise. It's also exporter. Uzbekistan is mostly reliant on natural gas, both for industrial and for industrial development, and also for the residential consumption. So despite being so diverse, what we see, the common trend that there is a huge heavily reliance on the fossil fuels. And then I mean, one of the typical justification of the reliance on fossil fuels in the region, that it says that, okay, we got resources, so we should use them. Oil and gas are relatively abundant sources in Central Asia. But then to make things even worse, the level of fossil fuel subsidies as a share of GDP is also really large. So on this graph, you can see that on the top right corner. So I guess let me outline the axis. So on the vertical axis, you have fossil fuel subsidies as a share of GDP. And on horizontal, you have energy intensity, which also was mentioned by Mr. Legato in the very beginning, as a region has very high energy intensity. And indeed, what we see here, that all countries of Central Asia, they have very high levels of energy intensity per $1 of GDP. So you can see this red triangles on the top. You can see it's really high. It's much higher than world average. And to make things even worse, the countries also provide the large fossil fuels. So for example, level of the fossil fuel subsidies, for example, in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, is comparable and similar to the oil-rich countries such as Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, etc. So, and Russia as well. So you can see that, in fact, that it's kind of not only the countries are reliant on fossil fuels, but also there's an incentive to actually to use more fossil fuels. So this policy has been implemented and being supported by the national governments for a long time. And now the countries are trying to shift, as was mentioned by Julia as well, to transition into clean energy, renewable energy. All the countries in the region are parts to the Paris Agreement. And you have seen from the presentation of distinguished speaker before me that about the goals about transition for Kazakhstan, for Uzbekistan, and also a huge reduction of greenhouse gases for Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. But there are a few challenges which was also outlined. So economic and political factors. So first of all, there is a huge dependence on fossil fuels, meaning that, for example, for Kazakhstan, its export revenues are important. For Uzbekistan, it's a question of the industrial development. For Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, it's basically reliance on consumption. At the same time, there are technical and infrastructure issues. Aging infrastructure was also mentioned. At the same time, inefficient use both in industry and in consumption. For example, in case of Kyrgyzstan, roughly around 70 to 80% of the existing energy infrastructure is outdated and needs investment or modernization. And to make things worse, with the climate change, there is a huge increase on pressure on already fragile infrastructure objects in remote areas, for example, in Tajikistan. At the same time, there are huge environmental concerns. Pollution and air pollution is very typical. High air pollution is very typical in large urban areas in Central Asia. At the same time, the governments have committed to Paris Agreement and have signed also local and international environmental treaties. Another environmental issue and concern or challenge, it's also related to water resources. For example, one is climate change, which what we know definitely from the latest IPCC reports that the water and melting of glaciers will intensify and the water scarcity will only increase. At the same time, for example, Tajikistan and Kazakhstan have large hydropower projects which will take years, decades to complete. At the same time, of course, they will require a lot of water. While we know that there is a huge potential in hydro industry and hydropower plants, hydro energy in general in the region, but there is a huge uncertainties what the coming decades will bring with a rapidly changing climate in the region. Another issue related to water is actually Koshatatepe canal is being built by Afghanistan, which also will have impact on the downstream countries in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. And project is still ongoing, and what will be the impact on the energy security and water security in general, it's also uncertain. So what the future projections looks like, I'm not going to repeat what was mentioned before, but all the countries have ambitiously set targets to achieve their renewable energy targets. And these targets, it's very interesting because these targets are getting updated almost every 2 years about the renewable energy targets. And this is, in my view, it's related. For example, Kazakhstan has changed recently its energy target. Uzbekistan announced it's also, I think they increased to 30%. Kyrgyzstan has announced a new project around 15-20%, etc., etc. So the reason why these renewable energy targets are getting updated is driven by two trends. The first trend is global trend. What we see that there is more funding flowing into the countries from different international agencies and private agencies into renewable energy deployment. At the same time, the cost of energy, renewable energy, has been plummeting. So what we see that cost of, for example, solar energy, it's now it's a fraction. It was when it which was I think it's around depending which project, it's around 5 cents, 4 cents. So the So these are global trends, and internally there is a increased recognition that reliance on fossil fuels, it actually pollutes more, it's more expensive and requires a lot of resources, etc. So these international and local trends are leading to the things like the future of the renewable energies are changing rapidly. And what we see here, for example, in Kyrgyzstan, there is a huge now project being announced in Issyk region to create a large solar power farm. In Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan has managed to attract a lot of investment from Middle Eastern countries to open a new large solar farms as well. In Kazakhstan, which has been a leader before, let's say 5 years before, the Kazakhstan was considered as a leader in renewable energy deployment in the region, while in these last 5 years, we can see that there is a huge progress in Uzbekistan and in Kyrgyzstan as well, while Tajikistan is mostly aiming for adaptation and mitigation activities. So without going into detail into the policy recommendations, I'll just say that there is kind of main things to keep in mind. For example, that diversification of energy mix, that means that less state monopoly. And this is very interesting because historically the Central Asian government's energy sector was a monopoly. And as was mentioned by the representative Irina as well, that actually off-grid and independent or private or household-based energy suppliers also will become dominant, since its renewable energy has a different approach to the energy production. Enhancing regulatory framework, for example, carbon policy is still missing. There are some discussions. For example, in Uzbekistan, there is a new project by World Bank again. So-called they will issue a carbon credits. First, actually, it's the first in the world, actually, not only in the region. So it's very interesting to see how it will work out. Kazakhstan used to have the working emission trading scheme. It does not have now. There is no discussion of carbon tax in none of the countries, but still we don't see any regulatory framework for carbon tax, but which is very important. If the countries are serious about renewable energy transition, then the carbon policy must be in place. Energy efficiency has been on the agenda for a very long time. It's very important, as was mentioned by from previous speakers. Okay, and then the old kind of new old recommendations. It's encouraging private sector investment and strengthening regional cooperation. And then the concluding. It's just 3 things I would like to mention. The region is heavily reliant still on fossil fuel. The trend, unfortunately, is that it doesn't change much for the last 30 years. Ambitious energy transition goals are announced, despite there are many challenges exist. And energy transition will require actually strong institutional support, investment, structural change in the economy, which is will be probably the biggest challenge. Thank you very much. This is the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Rahat, and for your really comprehensive insights. And there are indeed many challenges, but despite the current difficult situation, all countries, as you said, set very ambitious plans. And especially I want to highlight Kyrgyzstan that announced a 3-year emergency plan in energy sector. And this week in Vienna, there was Kyrgyz Energy at International Forum. And I hope renewable energy projects will be successful. But as you said, in all Central Asian countries, less state monopoly is really important. Thank you very much for your presentation. So now, dear participants, we have some time, 25 minutes for a Q&A session. And I encourage all participants to use the chat function to submit your questions. If you'd like to take a floor, please let me know. And please specify if your question is directed to a particular speaker. And let's begin. We have already several questions. I'm going to start with this question, but I saw that Mr. Leguti answered already in the chat, but I would like to, maybe you can take a floor and answer this question. So Nadia, she's asking about how developed countries, they can incentivize, and also they can directly contribute to the invest in the renewable energy or other projects in developing and least developed countries. Is it possible somehow to manage, to build dialogue on this and ask developed countries or other financial institutions to accelerate investment into developing countries? Mr. Leguti, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I did try to answer very quickly to the question. Indeed, there are many things that can be done to improve, to support the capital flows from developed countries to developing countries. The reasons is addressing the barriers. So what are the barriers? Why is not more capital going there? And there are a number of reasons. The first one is the investment opportunities, i.e. the local markets in emerging countries, particularly if you're looking at Africa and Southeast Asia, to a certain extent, a little bit Southeast Asia, are smaller markets from the purchasing power potential, not from the number of inhabitants or for the opportunity, but the bankable demand in those countries is relatively low, and therefore it is important to support a bankable demand by how much? For example, by creating energy markets, by creating electricity markets, by putting in place electricity markets that pay, systems measurement, putting in place infrastructure to measure electricity or gas consumption and billing methods that consumers can use it and can pay. So creating a viable and bankable demand, first of all, that will guarantee a demand for the investment. Energy investments is for the medium to long term, and therefore what they're looking at what will be my return on capital and will I get my cash back? And so that is the first thing. The second thing is as I said, is the overall is around the risking investments. Investing in emerging markets is considered risky from a number of investors from developed countries for a number of reasons. The first one is not many of these countries have complete and robust regulatory and legal frameworks around, investments, foreign direct investments, around in the energy space, around, as I mentioned, around the electricity markets and how they work between, power generation producers, transmissions, and distributors in the energy markets. You have incomplete regulatory frameworks for, capital flows when investors want to bring back their part of their capital invested, and some of those issues. So that's part of what a government can do, but not only. I mean, obviously the demand, the risk embedded in those investments is higher than in the developed country. And so what you can do, there are plenty of financial instruments and financial institutions that are there to share that risk with private investors. And some of those financial institutions are multilateral development banks. Some of others are insurance companies that can lower the degree, the need for the return on capital from the investments, and therefore the cost of those investments. Most of the issues around capital flows and why you don't have much investments going on is because the cost of capital for those investments is prohibitive in emerging markets, because that's what investors require for. And therefore, if you lower your return on capital from 15 to 5%, you are enlarging the possibilities of making more investments into that country. Some of the measures that I mentioned are meant to lower that from 15 down to 5%, addressing some of the issues, but as well addressing some of the consequences of these issues, like through an insurance product, for example, or through a blended finance structure where a multilateral development bank co-invests alongside a private investor. The solution cannot come only from public money, because public money is limited. the private sector has to be part of the solution, because that's where the massive amounts of money are available, and that's where they are ready to take as well those sort of risks. And therefore, orienting multilateral development banks and all the cooperation money towards climate objectives and the energy transition, not only or combining them with development issues, will help creating these blended finance structures that will support private sector investors coming to those countries by lowering the overall cost of capital and making a lot more projects into these countries feasible.
Much, Mr. Lugeti. Unfortunately, we approached the end of our session. I would like to thank all our esteemed speakers for their valuable contributions today. The insights shared have highlighted both the progress and the challenges we face in achieving the 7 targets. It's clear that while significant strides have been made, but there is still much work to be done, especially in developing and least developed countries. I also want to extend my gratitude to all the participants for joining us, engaging in the important discussion. And I thank our partner, Sustainable Energy of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, for the support and assistance for this event. Before we conclude, I want to draw your attention that the Bulan Institute launched its climate change and renewable energy program, and we are working on this topic. And also we have renewable energy experts. It's pro bono engagement, but we have 2 places left. If you are interested, please apply. And thank you again for your participation. Have a great day. Thank you.